The missing years. In the biblical narrative, there's a large gap in the chronology of Jesus' life, from the age of 12 to around 30, which is often referred to as the missing years. This gap has sparked widespread speculation, with the most controversial theory being that Jesus spent this time in India and Tibet. This theory gained popularity through the work of Nicholas Notovich, a Russian journalist who in 1894 published The Unknown Life of Jesus Christ. Notovich claimed to have found an ancient manuscript in the Himis monastery in Ladakh that mentioned a teacher named Isa, Jesus in Arabic, who studied with Brahmins and Buddhists. The archaeological evidence supporting this claim is minimal. Scholars such as Max Muller and J. Archibald Douglas visited the monastery and did not find the manuscript in question. However, proponents of this theory point to the similarities of Jesus' teachings to Eastern philosophies such as universal compassion and nonviolence as indirect evidence. The Ahmadiyya community in Kashmir even claims to have Jesus' tomb in Srinagar, claiming he fled the crucifixion and spent the rest of his life there. They point to a local figure called Uz Asaf, whose teachings are similar to those of Christianity. Holger Kirsten, in his book Jesus Lived in India, 1981, compiled these various proofs, including oral traditions and ritual similarities. Elizabeth Clare Prophet also popularized this theory with The Lost Years of Jesus, 1984. Although speculatively interesting, this theory is rejected by the majority of historical and theological scholars due to the lack of primary evidence and contradicts the Roman historical record, as well as the strong early Christian tradition of Jesus' death and resurrection in Jerusalem. Mary Magdalene theory. The theory that Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene is one of the most enduring controversies in Christian history, massively popularized through Dan Brown's novel The Da Vinci Code, 2003. This theory actually has deeper roots in Gnostic texts, such as the 3rd century Gospel of Philip, which refers to Mary as Jesus' companion and states that Jesus often kissed her on the mouth. Proponents of this theory point to the context of first-century Jewish culture, where a rabbi teacher like Jesus was usually expected to be married. The absence of explicit mention of Jesus' single status in the biblical canon is taken as circumstantial evidence. They also noted Mary's privileged role in the gospel narratives as the first witness to the resurrection and a faithful follower. The manuscript of the Gospel of Mary, discovered in 1896, depicts Mary as a disciple with deep spiritual knowledge, even beyond the male apostles, while Pistis Sophia, a 3rd century Gnostic text, depicts her as the most prominent among the disciples. The theory reached a political dimension with the claim that the descendants of Jesus and Mary formed a holy bloodline, the real or Holy Grail, that later became the Merovingian dynasty in France. The book Holy Blood, Holy Grail, 1982, by Begant, Leake, and Lincoln elaborated on this narrative, claiming the secret organization Priory of Sion protected the secret for centuries. Mainstream scholars reject this theory, pointing out that the texts supporting it date from a period well after the time of Jesus and reflect theological debates of the 2nd to 4th centuries. The Catholic and Orthodox churches categorically reject it as heretical, while historians emphasize the absence of archaeological evidence or contemporary documents supporting the marriage. Post-crucifixion survival theory. The swoon theory is one of the most persistent alternative explanations for the resurrection of Jesus. First popularized by Carl Friedrich Barth and Karl Heinrich Venturini in the 18th century, this theory holds that Jesus did not actually die on the cross, but rather simply fainted or fell into a coma, then recovered in the tomb and escaped. Proponents of this theory point to several physiological aspects of crucifixion. The average crucifixion victim survived for several days before dying from exhaustion and asphyxiation, while Jesus reportedly died in only about 6 hours. They also note that Pontius Pilate himself was astonished at Jesus' quick death, Mark 15, verses 44. This theory finds support from modern medical analysis, which suggests that the spear that pierced Jesus' side may have released pericardial fluid, not a sure sign of death. The mixture of myrrh and aloe used to prepare Jesus' body, John 19, verses 39 to 40, is believed to have healing properties and may have aided his recovery. Hugh Schonfield, in The Passover Plot, Insaned in 1965, developed a version of this theory, stating that Jesus planned to appear dead, with the help of a potion administered through a sponge while on the cross, but an unplanned spear thrust disrupted his plans. Holger Kirsten in The Jesus Conspiracy claims that the Shroud of Turin supports this hypothesis. The criticism of this theory is substantial. Modern medical experts emphasize that a person in a post-crucifixion condition with severe wounds, blood loss, and trauma could not have been able to shift the huge stone covering the tomb or give the impression of health to his followers. Furthermore, Roman soldiers were highly experienced in ensuring the death of convicts, with severe punishments for failing to do so. Scholars also note that this narrative doesn't explain why the disciples were willing to martyr themselves for a lie if they knew Jesus actually only survived the crucifixion, not rose from the dead. Jesus twin theory. The Jesus twins theory is one of the most controversial speculations in the study of alternative Christianity, first systematically developed by Robert Eisenman and popularized in Levi H. Dowling's The Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ, or 1908. This theory posits that Jesus had an identical twin brother who plays a pivotal role in the resurrection narrative. Proponents of this theory point to the Gospel of Thomas, a Gnostic text discovered in Nag Hammadi, Egypt in 1945. In the text, Thomas is referred to as Didymus, Gallic Greek for twin, and twin Thomas. Some interpret this as an indication that Thomas was Jesus' twin brother, although the text does not state this explicitly. A variant of this theory identifies Thomas Didymus, also known as Judas Thomas, as Jesus' twin. In Eastern Christian traditions, especially the Syrian Church, Thomas is honored as Jesus' brother. The apocryphal text, The Story of Thomas, even refers to him as the twin brother of the Messiah. Some versions of this theory state that Jesus' twin took his place on the cross, while the real Jesus fled to India or another location. Other versions state that the twin appeared after the crucifixion, creating the illusion of resurrection that is the foundation of the Christian faith. Controversial works such as Jesus the Man, equal in 1992, by Barbara Thiering, developed the theory that Jesus had a twin brother who helped create the resurrection narrative as a political strategy to strengthen the reformist Jewish movement. Mainstream scholars reject this theory for several compelling reasons. First, there are no contemporary historical records that mention Jesus' twin. Secondly, in the small and closely connected first-century Jewish society, the existence of Jesus' twin would have been difficult to hide and would have been used by his opponents to discredit the resurrection claim. Thirdly, the genealogies of Jesus in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke do not mention twins. The most fundamental criticism is that this theory ignores the historical evidence of Jesus' early followers' deep belief in his physical resurrection, a belief that made them willing to face persecution and death. Political revolutionary theory. The interpretation of Jesus as an anti-Roman political revolutionary is one perspective that has received significant attention in modern historical studies. In contrast to the traditional portrayal of Jesus as a purely spiritual figure, this theory positions Jesus as the leader of a Jewish nationalist resistance movement aimed at overthrowing the Roman occupation of first-century Palestine. Proponents of this theory point to the turbulent socio-political context of Judea, with various resistance groups such as the Zealots and Sicarii active against Roman rule. They reinterpret Jesus' actions in revolutionary terms, such as the cleansing of the temple being seen as an attack on an institution collaborating with Rome, and the selection of the 12 disciples reflecting the military structure of the resistance. S.G.F. Brandon's Jesus and the Zealots, 1967, became an important milestone in this theory, arguing that the early church deliberately minimized the political aspects of Jesus to avoid Roman persecution. Reza Aslan in Zealot, the Life and Times of Jesus of Nazareth, 2013, repopularized this view, emphasizing that the title King of the Jews on the cross indicates a political execution. Proponents of this theory also highlight Jesus' proximity to Simon, who was nicknamed Zealot, and his possible connection to the anti-Roman Essenes. They interpret Jesus' statements such as, "I have not come to bring peace but a sword," Matthew 10:34, as a revolutionary call. The criticism of this theory is substantial. Scholars point out that Jesus' teachings on loving enemies and giving to Caesar what is Caesar's contradict revolutionary ideology. Moreover, there is no evidence that Jesus' followers used violence systematically except for isolated incidents such as Peter cutting off a soldier's ear. John Dominic Crossan and other scholars argue that Jesus is better understood as a social revolutionary who opposed hierarchical structures and economic injustice rather than a nationalist freedom fighter in the military sense. They emphasize that the kingdom Jesus proclaimed was transformative spiritual, not political territorial. Jesus in Japan. In the remote village of Shingo in Aomori Prefecture, Japan, there is a tomb believed by locals to be the burial place of Jesus Christ. According to the Takanouchi document discovered in 1936, Jesus did not die on the cross, but his brother Isukiri did. Jesus then fled to Japan, changed his name to Torai Taro Daitenku, and lived to the age of 106. This legend states that Jesus first came to Japan at the age of 21 and studied Japanese wisdom for 12 years before returning to Judea. After the crucifixion incident, he returned to Japan with a pinch of his mother's hair and a piece of his brother's ear, settled in Shingo, married a Japanese woman named Mayuko, and had 3 children. Evidence claimed to support this theory includes unusual local names such as Isukiri Mura, Isukiri Village, and Judaibo, Kyatsam Jewish Hill, as well as local traditions such as marking babies with the sign of the cross on the forehead and a local dialect containing words claimed to be derived from Hebrew. Since 1964, Jesus' tomb in Shingo has been a tourist attraction that draws thousands of visitors each year with an annual Christ Festival featuring traditional dances. Although rejected by mainstream historians and theologians, this theory remains an important part of local cultural identity and is an interesting example of religious syncretism and the adaptation of Christian narratives in the Japanese context. Jesus and the Essenes. The connection between Jesus and the Essenes has been the subject of intense research since the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran in 1947. The Essenes were an ascetic Jewish sect that lived in a separate community in the Judean wilderness around the 2nd century BCE to the 1st century CE, coinciding exactly with the time of Jesus' life. Some of the striking doctrinal similarities between the teachings of Jesus and the Essenes include the emphasis on voluntary poverty, sharing of possessions, water baptism as a purification ritual, and the waiting for the coming of the Messiah. The ritual of eating together with the Essenes is reminiscent of the Last Supper with bread and wine blessed by the community leader. John the Baptist, who had a close relationship with Jesus, exhibits very similar characteristics to the Essenes living in the wilderness, wearing simple clothing and performing ritual baptisms. Some scholars, such as James Tabor, suggest that John may have been raised in an Essene community before beginning his public ministry. The geographical location also supports this possible connection. Bethany across the Jordan River, where John baptized, was close to the Essene settlement of Qumran. Jesus himself often withdrew into the wilderness, a common practice among the Essenes. Terminology in Jesus' teachings, such as sons of light, princes of darkness, and the emphasis on moral dualism have strong parallels in Qumran literature. Jesus' criticism of the temple and the official priesthood also reflects the Essene attitude that the temple had been defiled. Although direct evidence of Jesus' affiliation with the Essenes is lacking, the historical context and theological similarities suggest the possibility that Jesus' teachings were influenced by or responded to the evolving Essene thought of his day. Roman manipulation theory. The theory of Roman political manipulation of the Jesus narrative highlights how the Roman Empire may have influenced the development of early Christianity in the interests of political stability. The tipping point in this theory is the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, which was convened and chaired by Emperor Constantine, even though he himself had not been baptized at the time. Constantine, who had just won power after a bloody civil war, faced a divided empire, including in religious matters. By taking control of Christian doctrinal debates, he created a powerful political unifying tool. The immediate results of the council, the establishment of the doctrine of the Trinity and the rejection of Arianism, had political implications as important as theological ones. Evidence of Rome's manipulation is seen in the drastic change in the post-Constantine image of Jesus. From the initial image of a beardless young shepherd in the catacombs, Jesus was transformed into a Zeus, Jupiter-like figure with royal robes and imperial attributes. This shift reinforced the association between religious and imperial authority. Eusebius, Constantine's court historian, strategically edited and organized the New Testament canon, eliminating texts that were potentially subversive to Rome's authority. Gospels that emphasized obedience to authority were given priority, while those that emphasized socio-political liberation were eliminated. The change in attitude towards the empire in post-Constantine Christian literature is striking. From a persecuted community, Christianity turned into a supporter of the imperial status quo. Paul's letters emphasizing obedience to rulers, Romans 13, received new emphasis. The impact of this manipulation lasted for centuries, creating an alliance between church and state that helped Rome maintain control over vast territories through ecclesiastical structures, even after the collapse of imperial politics in the West in the 5th century AD. Egyptian origins. The connection between Jesus and Egypt goes much deeper than just the story of the flight to Egypt in Matthew's Gospel. Archaeological and textual evidence points to the significant influence of ancient Egyptian traditions on the shaping of early Christian narratives and symbolism. The parallelism between Horus and Jesus is striking in several aspects. Both are depicted as born of a virgin, Isis or Maria, have birth celebrated on the winter solstice, and are associated with star symbolism. Isis is often depicted breastfeeding Horus, similar to the Madonna and child iconography that later became central in Christian art. Even the title Theotokos is Mother of God for Mary has precedence in the cult of Isis as Mother of God. The concept of Jesus' resurrection has parallelisms with the Osiris-Horus myth, where Osiris was killed but resurrected through a magical ritual performed by Isis. This ritual of burial and resurrection became the core of the mysteries of Osiris practiced until the Roman era. The Egyptian Ankh cross, a symbol of eternal life, also bears a visual resemblance to early Christian crosses. Historical evidence points to a large Jewish community in Alexandria, Egypt, which became a Hellenistic intellectual center. It was here that the Septuagint, Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures, was compiled, which later became the basis for many quotations in the New Testament. Philo of Alexandria, a Jewish philosopher contemporary to Jesus, developed the concept of the Logos, word, which was later adopted in the Gospel of John. Historical accounts from Plutarch and Apuleius show that Isis-Osiris worship was widespread throughout the Mediterranean in the 1st century, creating a conceptual foundation for the rapid spread of Christianity. Even some of the early Christian churches in Egypt were built on converted Isis temples. The Christian liturgical calendar also shows Egyptian influence, with the celebration of Easter following the pattern of ancient Egyptian springtime celebrations associated with the resurrection of Osiris and the renewal of life after the Nile flood. Jesus' alchemical teachings. Some controversial scholars have proposed the theory that behind the exoteric narrative of Jesus' teachings lies a system of alchemical knowledge that was only taught to selected disciples. This theory rests on Jesus' own statement in the Gospel of Mark 4, verses 11. "To you it has been given to know the mysteries of the kingdom of God, but to outsiders all things are revealed in parables." The parable of the water into wine at the wedding in Cana can be read as a metaphor for the process of alchemy, the transformation of a basic substance into a higher elixir. Similarly, the phrase, "I am the bread of life," and the ritual of Holy Communion have parallelisms with the alchemical concept of divine food transforming the physical body. The apocryphal Gospel of Thomas, discovered in Nag Hammadi in 1945, contains more explicit esoteric teachings, such as, "If you bring out what is in you, what you bring out will save you. If you do not bring out what is in you, what you do not bring out will destroy you." Medieval alchemists interpreted this as a reference to the process of internal purification. The dying and rising again symbolism central to the Jesus narrative has a direct correspondence with the alchemical stages of nigredo, blackening death, albedo, bleaching purification, and rubedo, milking resurrection. Even the cross itself can be interpreted as a symbol of the confluence of the 4 basic elements of alchemy. Historical records show that the community of therapists in Egypt, which some scholars consider to be related to early Christianity, practiced a form of spiritual medicine that incorporated elements of alchemy. Eusebius, in his History of the Church, mentions their secret practices involving internal transformation. The Gnostic tradition, which claims to derive from the secret teachings of Jesus, is full of alchemical symbolism such as divine marriage, hieros, the transformation of metal into gold as a metaphor for spiritual enlightenment, and self-purification through secret knowledge, gnosis. Medieval alchemical manuscripts such as the Aurora Consurgens, attributed to Thomas Aquinas, explicitly link Christ's teachings to the opus magnum of alchemy, suggesting a continuity of esoteric traditions that may date back to the time of Jesus himself.